I'm Namrata Nadkarni, the CEO and founder of Intent Communications, and today I will be interviewing Al Tama of ORBCOMM. Al, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Namrata. Good to speak with you today. Um, I'm the General Manager and Vice President of Container and Port Solutions here at Orbcom. And I've been in the technology space around the shipping industry for about 20 years now. And so I'm looking forward to discussing, some of the topics around technology today.
Wonderful. So let's go straight into it. I know that you were recently at Cool Logistics and you had a rather interesting panel. And I thought we should touch upon some of the points brought up in that discussion. One of which is the fact that because the industry has been extremely slow, the shipping and logistics industry has been extremely slow to adopt digital technology, we can sometimes see other industries progressing much faster than us. Why do you think that shipping is lagging behind?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I touched a bit on this at Cool Logistics as well. And what I've seen over the 20 years or so that I've been in the industry is that there were many issues at a certain date and time, but now with a retrospective looking back, I think what it boils down to is complexity. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into the adoption of technology, but what we've seen is when it comes to smaller regional lines, they've been quicker to adopt the technology, and it's because some of that complexity is lessened. It doesn't mean that the logistics of installing an entire fleet are not challenging, and it doesn't mean that the once again trying to achieve those operational efficiencies by changing some of your methods of operation, to leverage the data and the visibility isn't complex for a smaller line. It's just less complex than the largest shippers in the world. And with the largest shippers, they are the ones that really have been the slowest to adopt because of that great complexity. And therefore, it makes the industry look like we don't have a great adoption, when in fact, when it comes to the smaller lines, many of them have been actually using technology for such a while. And they do today to great success. But percentage-wise, that's still less than 10% of the industry if you take out the top 10.
One of the things that have been flagged a number of times in the trade press is the notion of people being really worried about being caught out by changing technology and being, Betamax versus VHS. So can you talk about this as being a factor for reticence to adopt new technology?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the previous question, there have been many other factors beyond the complexity that have come into play, and one of them is concern about which technology to to employ, and what does my device need to have, and are my devices going to be compatible with other systems? And I think where we are today is we've arrived at a place where there are standards published and being published for communication, and they will be employed. And also there are standards for data sharing that are being published as well. So those concerns, although at Orbcom we've always been interoperable, and hopefully we'll talk more about that in a moment. We've always been interoperable with the ability to share data very freely and integrate our data with other systems, or integrate data from other systems into our portal. Now with the publishing of the standards, I think it removes a lot of that fear, because that's what I think it really was. I think the technology was there, but there was the fear and the concern. And future proofing, if that's what you were speaking about, it is a real concern. That's a little bit different, and I think that's you have to make sure that you're employing technology that is future proofed, and I can describe that more if you like.
I think that's really great. And I think you're completely right about the fact that interoperability and future proofing are essentially connected, because from my understanding, the world is getting smaller. Everything is getting more connected digitally. So yes, let's talk about the future proofing. Let's talk about the fact that, my Amazon Alexa needs to integrate with my Google Home, needs to integrate with my phone. What does this look like in a maritime shipping and logistics world?
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because right at the start we talked about well, why has this industry been slow? And I think once again over the 20 years we weren't in that kind of Amazon Google world but technology was being adopted on a regional basis back then. And yes, as the world has changed, I mean, now we're to the point where just visibility is just expected in every facet of life. And whether we realize it or not, certainly the people in our industry realize it, that the backbone is really, container shipping. That's where we get our goods, that come from overseas, wherever we reside in the world. And so we need to, make sure that there is the visibility there that everyone expects, because it benefits so many people beyond just the shipping line. When it comes to interoperability, as I said, here at Orbcom, we have always published and been able to support APIs that go two ways. So whether it's integrating data from other systems into the Orbcom portal for your visibility needs, or the other way, getting data from Orbcom IoT devices into databases or backend systems, which can then be shared, downstream and outside of our customers' systems. Those are all available and things that Orbcom has a lot of experience doing, both in the container space, but also in some of our other verticals that are a little bit more regionalized, such as over-the-road transportation and heavy equipment, for example. So we have a long pedigree of being able to do that, and that's really the key to interoperability. Interoperability, for me, really means the ability to share data, and when it comes to sharing data, that also means supporting devices, IoT devices from other vendors. And here at Orbcom, we have a history of doing that as well. In the maritime space that we're talking about, today, Orbcom's the only vendor that has, IoT devices from other telematics providers as part of our data set. And that can be, visible on our portal or integrated with data feeds that go, to our customers. So that's a big difference maker. And that's what I think, the world really needs, right? You can't be siloed. When you're selecting a technology provider today, because of the slowness to adopt, many are siloed. And so that's something that, we have to overcome, because the data is only, powerful when it can be, consumed by many different parties in many different ways. And the good news is, here at Orbcom, we have a case study and a track record of being able to do that. And so we can demonstrate the success and the ease with which that can be accomplished.
That's really interesting. And I think you make a really good point about the fact that data sharing needs to be a reality. Am I right to think that there has been a reticence within the industry to share data, which perhaps is one of the reasons, people worry about losing a competitive edge? Do you think that that plays a factor in slower adoption of IoT in maritime?
I certainly think it does, or it has. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. If we were talking 4 years ago, I was at Cool Logistics, for example, and I was talking about that reticence and how that was maybe one of the larger barriers at the time. But once again, the world has evolved. And I think, when it comes to other initiatives that aren't limited to maritime, such as, let's say, blockchain, for example, it's just part of our life that you have to, share data and make data available. Now, the beauty of the APIs is that you can control the data that you share. So, that reticence of, kind of having an unedited feed that might show the good, the bad, and the ugly, it doesn't have to be a concern, because you can, control who gets visibility and access to what. And that's a very important part of of a successful API implementation, making sure that people get the data they need, because, too much data is essentially waste, right? It's like, what do I
Yes.
do with that? I don't need that data.
No, that's great. So one of the things that IoT is supposed to be helping the industry kind of realize is the notion of end-to-end transparency. So can you talk about what products we have at the moment that allow this, and how we're going to overcome the so-called black hole situation that we have, where you get a container on land where you've got 3G, mobile phone, satellite tracking sensors, all sorts of tech. You get it to the ship, it goes on board a ship, and then 6 weeks later you hope that that your cargo is fine. Can we talk about sort of what we can do to address this black hole of visibility?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, the adoption of technology amongst the regional lines is something that is, already exists today. And part of that adoption of technology, when we talk about containers, is having connectivity while at sea. The containers spend a very, significant percentage of their time at sea. So just having real-time visibility on land obviously kind of doesn't make sense if, the majority of the time those containers are at sea and you lose that real-time visibility, the black hole that you described. So here at Orbcom, what we offer is a system called Vessel Connect, which
Mhm.
is really unique in the industry, as we enable connectivity while at sea. And so that provides, real-time visibility to the terrestrial parties that are interested in that cargo and in that shipment, while also, and this is the difference maker, providing operational efficiencies on the vessel. So to date, there have been systems that help automate and provide monitoring on the vessel, but that data is just contained on the vessel. It doesn't provide any value to the people on shore, and it's really
Mm.
just for the crew's efficiencies and safeties. And where Vessel Connect differs is that we're able to, solve all those use cases. So not only help the on-vessel operation, but also provide that visibility on land so that people can ensure that their load is on time, know where it is. We also combine that Vessel Connect data with the AIS location, so we give very accurate location as to where the ship is, the vessel is, while at sea. And that data can then be analyzed so that you can get more predictive analysis around when arrival times will be, or be aware of delays. And of course, be aware of the load that you have. If it's refrigerated, might be compromised because there's an issue with the equipment. So
Mhm.
that's where, to date, Orbcom has been is the only vendor that can offer a system like that and has deployed it, in the world.
So in terms of your system, not only one of the things that I'm understanding is that it provides information both to the crew on board as well as to people on shore if they want to provide support. Can we talk about how it really is changing the scene for crew on board? Does it mean that they don't have to go look at the cargo as much? Does it mean that they're more likely to be able to find your container, to deliver it on time, to give you that visibility? Especially with crews under pressure in rough environments, how does your technology kind of plug into their needs, really?
Sure. And it's a great question. And one of the kind of phrases that I use, repeatedly when speaking to customers or the industry is that the beauty of the telematics and the IoT technology that we offer at Orbcom is that it's not one size fits all. It's very customizable. So if I look across, my customer set, the technology on the vessel and quite frankly, the solution that goes on containers, refrigerated containers in particular, isn't utilized the same way by each of them. So
Mhm.
when it comes to crew safety, yeah, of course, you can eliminate the need for actual physical checks of the reefers because it can be done from a screen in an automated fashion. You also have control of those reefers while, either from the shore or from, the vessel when they're using the Vessel Connect system, as well. But and then it also provides you the ability to do certain things if you have empty containers, that are very empty reefer containers that are very commonly, moved. You can use them to pre-trip on the vessel, as well, with our technology. So there's many different ways that you can provide safety and efficiencies, to the crew. And in some cases, we have customers that are actually taking some of those responsibilities away from the crew and doing them from shore. So every customer is a little different. They all have different operations, but that's really what I was referring to earlier as a difference maker. Whereas a localized, a traditional vessel system can only be utilized by the crew on board. Orbcom's Vessel Connect allows people from the shore to also control those reefer containers while they're at sea, and so they can actually make changes to things like set point or clear alarms or run pre-trips from the shore as well. And that's a big difference maker.
I mean, that sounds really interesting. And I think if you're offering such different levels of use depending on what each individual ship owner and what each individual charterer really wants for their vessel, um, that would then run into how can you really future proof this if you're trying to meet different needs, presumably evolving standards. um, how can you make sure that the tech that you're investing in is going to be long term and in for what is for shipping quite a new era in terms of IoT instead of the connected technology, and we're already talking about automated vessels. So how can you
Mhm.
make sure that you have the right tech for the job and that you're not going to spend a lot of money on something that tomorrow is going to be a little bit outdated?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the reason why it's a great question is not only because you mentioned future proofing, but you tied the vessel into that question, and it's key because once again, not having a black hole, is key to end-to-end visibility. And what really drives end-to-end visibility is the availability of a network. So
Hmm.
when we talk about future proofing, the foundation of future proofing is making sure that you have a device that goes on your container that's going to be able to communicate with the all the networks that are available today and possibly ones that are tomorrow. So that all
Hmm.
starts at the cellular modem it's in a device. We're all familiar with the terms 4G, 3G, and 2G when we talk about networking. But what's interesting is the details that are there within. So when you say 4G, for example, you know, the key for 4G is that you have a global 4G modem. And if you say global, once again, digging into the details, that means you have to support all the bands that are around the globe. And so if
Mm.
you only support one band in a particular region, or worse, you don't support any bands in let's say Asia, but you do in Europe, that's not really global LTE, and that isn't really future proof. We
And
have
that would really
visibility.
help shipping, which is so international.
Absolutely. And, we have visibility into what networks are going to be available, a roadmap, if you will, for network availability, but those things aren't static, they do change. So what you need to do is cast a wide net. And at Orbcom, what we have done is we offer the first truly global, LTE device when it comes for reefer containers, supporting multiple bands in each region and every country so that there are no dark spots. But there's actually one more detail that is also equally, if not more significant. And that's what SIM is driving that device. You could have the radio capability to connect with the network, but if you're not authorized to do so because your network provider doesn't have coverage in that area, you still have that dark spot and that black hole. One of the unique offerings that Orbcom has is the Orbcom Global Sim. And with the Global Sim, we are able to connect to over 650 networks in more than 200 countries today. And that's totally unique to the marketplace. What that means is when you go, it doesn't matter what country you're in or what continent or what region you're in, you're able to cast a wide net of connection and connectivity. And that's the most foundational to having a device that is future proof. So in the US, one example for is that our devices can connect to all four major carriers. That's totally unique as those carriers don't work together. But with the Orbcom Global SIM, we're able to offer connectivity across those four networks. So what that means is that you have the widest coverage base using that SIM. But tying it back to the vessel, having 4G, 3G, 2G technology, your vessel system has to be something that's common for not only your devices as a shipper or a carrier, but also for your alliance partners. And your alliance partners are going to install IoT as well. And so what technology are they employing? So there isn't one answer. Once again, it's not one size fits all. What we have found at Orbcom is one fairly universal standard for communication is 2G. All devices should be able to fall back to 3G and 2G. And although those are old networks, they still exist in parts of the world. And while watching a YouTube video may be difficult over 2G, transmitting data from a reefer container actually isn't difficult, right? Because the data, the bandwidth requirements aren't as great. So with 2G being fairly universal, that's something that has been very successful implementation on the vessel, and that helps you future-proof because part of future-proofing is making sure you could talk to devices tomorrow that you might not be talking to today, and those could be dry container devices, and those could be devices from other telematics providers.
I think that's a really interesting point you've raised because we talk about future proofing, that to me is an example of how you have already future proofed something because you're using the right technology for the right job. So in the case where you're talking about 2G for Reefer Connect, I mean, nowadays on land, 2G is so old school, you wouldn't really think about it. But for you, what you're saying is your tech is 5G ready, but also talks to 2G, and you have all these connections. So that really sounds like you've put thought into how the customer journey is going to evolve with tech, which is quite useful to an industry that is notably reticent.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Namrata. At Orbcom with our reefer container device, what we've done is we have a truly global LTE device with a unique SIM that does provide fallback to 3G and 2G, and is also 5G and NB-IoT ready as well for those, more future networks that aren't really in use today, but the capability is there. And when you add other capabilities to the device like we have at Orbcom, so for example, LoRa or Bluetooth, you really cast a wide net in terms of how you can enable that device for communication. And as I said, it's not one size fits all. I mentioned 2G as an example for use that's been very successful on the vessel, but we've also successfully employed LoRa. So for other customers that are using that technology, and so do their vessel sharing partners. So, and Bluetooth is something else that can be also used, for collection of data. So there are many different ways to achieve a goal. And the key for me when you're selecting a vendor and why Orbcom is different is that we offer you the ability to choose the one that's best for your use case. And we can also bring our industry experience to the table to help you make that decision.
That's wonderful. And let's talk about that industry experience, because from my understanding, one of the real strengths that Orbcom brings is that you bring knowledge sharing from other sectors. You're not just active in maritime, you're active along the supply chain, you're active on land, you own satellites, you are a one-stop shop for whatever is needed. And if you're actually looking at backward compatibility and the customer journey, this sounds like, you're bringing quite a lot to the table. So can you give me an idea of what maritime should be keeping its eye on from your other experiences?
Sure, and to comment further on that, at Orbcom, we have a team of maritime specialists, people that have been in the industry equally as long as I have or longer, that have a knowledge of the workings of the industry to help bring that to the technology. We marry that with cutting edge technology experts, to provide that backbone. So you're not limited to one set or the other, just very tech savvy or very industry savvy. We have a good combination of both. And then to expand that with the other, what we call at Orbcom business verticals, it is valuable because trends that we see being employed in other areas, we do look at them across all the verticals. So sometimes a trend that we see in maritime may affect something that's going on in heavy equipment, or maybe over the road and back and forth and vice versa. To answer the question a little bit better, what I see, and we started the conversation this way, about maritime being a little bit slower to employ certain technologies. So what we at Orbcom have been able to do is be prepared for things that have come down the pike at maritime, such as these standards with unified data models, API integrations, network technology outages that we have gleaned from more localized operations across the globe. And we've been able to utilize our satellite technology as well to figure out how to enable communication on the vessel that is very efficient, so as not to utilize bandwidth, unnecessary bandwidth at sea, which is still fairly high cost, related to the terrestrial communications. So the good news is when you select Orbcom as your IoT vendor, although in the reefer container space, that's what we're solely focused on, we do have a wide background in terms of technology and adoption that we can also bring to the table and help you install the best solution for your use case.
One of my understandings is that IoT is basically going to give us an absolutely interconnected, completely transparent supply chain. But obviously at the moment, there are a lot of companies that work in silos, which is their area of specialization. Can you please talk to me about how this is going to change and what tomorrow's customer can expect from companies that operate in the space?
Sure. That's the interesting part about Orbcom. When we talk to a customer that comes to us with a need, such as to outfit their containers or their reefers with IoT, we bring those experts to the table, and that's really what we're focused on. But because Orbcom has experience in other verticals, we're able to really connect the end-to-end vision. And so not all our customers are shipping lines, right? And in some cases, we deal with BCOs, 3PLs, or also over the road, truckers, as well as, warehouses and actually endpoint shops. So,
and you even own your own satellites. So quite a lot you're
true
bringing
too.
to the table.
Yeah. So we talk about the connected world. You have to marry all that data together to have a full end-to-end visibility of supply chain. And we can help all those parties do that. Orbcom isn't necessarily the solution, for that in terms of, come to us and we're going to provide everything to you, but we can help make that integration by helping you share that data, making it, something that's widely applicable, and also making those connection points that don't exist by using our technologies such as a satellite or our IoT devices. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing at Orbcom outside of maritime is a much more connected supply chain, and then maritime kind of lagging behind, where that's where a lot of the data, it isn't available, quite frankly, or isn't being shared. And that's
Yes.
what we're advocating for at Orbcom, and trying to help connect that data to the other portions of the chain, mostly the ones that reside hinterland, to make that end-to-end visibility really possible. And that's also leveraging other vendors and other technologies, and that's okay too, because that's what we really want. We want a connected world.
So, in this new connected world, one of the things that you're really bringing to the table is your experience in other sectors, which range from heavy machinery and mining to trucks to actually owning satellites. Can we talk about what the advantages are that maritime and the container supply chain should look forward to, rather than being worried? What is the new wonderful future going to bring, and what are the advantages that they should really be keeping their eye on?
Yeah, the easy integration of the data, and once you gather data, because to really leverage the power of data, you have to accumulate a large data set. And
Yes.
so inland on the supply chain, those two things have happened: the sharing of data, and also the accumulation of data. When you have the sharing of data, of course, that gives like instantaneous, visibility, and provides people with the knowledge to take an action, with a little bit of forethought. But when you have the accumulation of data, that's when you can get into the data analytics and start using machine learning and AI to really make things automated. And one thing that has happened in our world, besides becoming more of a an Amazon Google world, is we now have the pandemic of COVID-19, which has kind of highlighted the need for, in some cases, less human interaction and more automation, and less physical touching, and being able to see things remotely. And
Mhm.
that's really what is coming down the chain. Once maritime is able to accumulate more data, it's not just going to be about knowing where your container is. It'll really be about predictive maintenance on a reefer container. It'll be about arrival times, and those things will also provide efficiencies to the shippers themselves, as they're able to look at that historical data set and crunch the numbers, quite frankly, more easily, to help and improve their efficiencies.
That's so interesting because basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're talking about going away from just transparency towards proactive efficiency, where you're able to make those connections and spot those trends within the data so that, we're building something together as an industry rather than each individual company. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's fair. And it's, so for example, the data, will help the actual shipping lines, the carriers, improve their operations, right? But it also helps the actual, end customer who's shipping the, let's say produce in this case. If they
Mhm.
have a shipment that's delayed and they have visibility into that, they can, accelerate another shipment, to be able to keep, the shelves, supplied. Similarly, if you have a load that might be, maybe ripening a little bit too fast, even with our
Mhm.
controlled atmosphere technology, there's always a breaking point. That could be something that you could use in terms of, get that, first in, first out type of mentality, or sell that produce at a little bit of a discount because it doesn't have the shelf life that you expected it to have. Those things are only possible when you have, the visibility and the data at your fingertips, and those decisions, that can be made today, by initially, I should say, by human intervention, then become automated as you accumulate that data and are able to apply ML and AI.
So what you're doing is effectively automating risk management using data such that at the end of it you could still have a human vetting the decisions made by AI to ensure that you're kind of really getting bang for your buck, but provided all the shipping lines buy in and the technology kind of finds its way on board ships, we're looking at a far more connected, far more efficient future with a lot less waste. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, the statistics around food waste, if we're talking about, perishables, I mean, it's just
Mhm.
astounding. The billions upon billions of pounds when I talk about weight of perishable cargo, and then that translates into the hundreds of billions of dollars of waste that happens per year. And that can really be mitigated, with technology. And I do think that that the shippers are right now at that tipping point where the next 2 years in the maritime space is going to see an explosion of technology adoption. And so, as I said, we have to accumulate that data to really be able to analyze it. And so, I think that will start now, and we're going to see, I think, a much greater efficiencies achieved here in the 2020s by the maritime industry.
Shall we perhaps talk about standards? Because I know that this is something that a lot of ship owners and a lot of cargo carriers are flagging as being something that they view as risky. When you invest in technology one day, your standards for tomorrow could suddenly make it obsolete or redundant, and it feels like things are evolving quite quickly. How is this something that Orbcom is dealing with?
Yeah, we at Orbcom stay on top of the standards in the maritime space, as much as is physically possible. This is something that we bring to the table as experience from other sectors, such as let's say heavy equipment, for example, where unified data standards have existed for quite some time. So when it comes to the data standards, we are part of those conversations. The ones that we are a little bit more on the periphery of, we are very in touch with the bodies that are working on those standards. And so, we have confidence that we are compliant, and we will be compliant with what is published in the future. To date, the DCSA standard on the vessel, for example, Orbcom's fully compliant with, and we expect to continue to be compliant with standards that come out in the future. That's from the data perspective. But there's also standards that are possible from the device perspective, and those are also very significant when it comes to future proofing. So once again, Orbcom's part of the conversation, and so by being there and as industry experts and weighing in, on those committees, we're able to get insight into what's coming down the road. And what we can say is that today, we're fully compliant with any standard that is published or we expect to be published within the next year or two. When new standards do come out, they generally have a time for implementation. And what we at Orbcom are ready to do is then, comply with those future standards. So for example, when we talk about reefer container, we're currently on our 4th generation of device. So that goes to show how, we have evolved and innovated, to react to different things in the industry, technology and also standards. And so we expect to continue to do that, through the 2020s and into the future.
That sounds really great, Al. From what you're saying, we're looking at a completely new future, which is interconnected with lots of digital offerings, lots of efficiency gains to be had. And it sounds like it's going to be wonderful. So, talking directly to your customers, can you give them an idea of what this future will mean for them in terms of tangible benefits to the sector?
Sure. With the publication of standards, now near completion, and with some of the major shipping lines participating in digitalization efforts, the good news is that it appears the industry is ready to really tip when it comes to the adoption of technology. I expect the next 2 years to really see a wide pouring of technology when it comes to telematics into the container space, and that's going to start the accumulation of the data, which is so important, to achieve those downstream efficiencies and future efficiencies when you apply ML and AI to those data sets. So the good news is that when it comes to beneficial cargo owners or people downstream in the supply chain, that visibility that you've been craving so much from the container space is coming, and it's almost there. And then the good news for the world is that the efficiencies when it comes to the ability to apply automation and artificial intelligence is also right at its precipice. And we, of course, at Orbcom, are here to facilitate all those initiatives, and that's what we bring to the table.
That sounds really great. Thank you so much for making the time with us.
Thank you, Namrata.